I'm Margherita Coppolino. I'm the current chair of the Australian Federation of the Disability Organisation. We are one of 3 organisations that are part of the Alliance in partnership with Carers Australia and the National Disability Services. We here today are interviewing Minister Fifield. Welcome, Minister.
Great to be here.
Minister, I know your background because we've met on numerous occasions before the election and after the election. But a lot of people out there don't know a lot about you, so this is an opportunity for them to find out more about you. So can you just tell us, what was your experiences of people with disabilities and the disability sector before you became the Shadow Minister?
I think I was pretty typical of people who have taken on front bench responsibility for disabilities in not having had a great exposure to people with disability. I didn't have, at that time, a close friend or a family member with disability. So I'd been operating on the assumption that because we live in a wealthy country and we pay our taxes, that if you had a disability, you'd get the support that you need. Obviously, I was wrong. That wasn't the case, and the scales literally fell from my eyes as I realised that the system for people with disability is one that's based on rationing and queuing, and it became apparent pretty quickly that there had to be a better way.
Why do you think the Prime Minister Abbott gave you this portfolio in this government?
I think the Prime Minister was keen to ensure that there was maximum continuity moving from opposition to government, that I'd learnt a lot as the Shadow for Disabilities, and there was the opportunity to use that knowledge and that experience in government. And I think the Prime Minister also formed the view that it was particularly important as we implement the NDIS, that there be continuity and that there be someone in the role of Minister who knows what the issues are. I think he's got confidence in me to deliver.
And look, from the disability sector, we were really pleased that there was continuity. How has the role and your responsibilities changed as you've moved from the Shadow Minister to the new Minister?
Well, when you're in opposition, you're a commentator to some extent and also an advocate. In government, you're still an advocate as the Minister for Disabilities, but you move on to actually being a decision maker and someone who has responsibility. And I've got to say, once you're sworn in and you formally have that responsibility, it's actually quite daunting. It's exciting, but it's also daunting because I know that there are so many Australians with disability who deserve a better deal, and in large part the realisation of that deal falls upon my shoulders.
Tell us, how would your approach to the NDIS different to the previous government? People really want to know this one. So.
Well, I think one of the great things over the last 3 or 4 years is that there's been a great deal of bipartisanship around the NDIS and disability policy more broadly. People with disability and their families understandably have a pretty low threshold when it comes to partisan point scoring. They just want us to get on with the job of fixing things. And one of the things we're going to do is to put in place a joint parliamentary committee to oversee the implementation of the NDIS, to ensure that there is a forum where questions about design of the scheme can be raised by members of Parliament in a way that's not seen to be partisan. I think that's important to help make the scheme the best that it can be. So I want to see a continuation of the bipartisan approach so that we can have everyone put their heads together in a cooperative environment to see the NDIS be the best that it can be.
Having just said that, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that the NDIS actually facing in coming years?
I think one of the big challenges is expectations. There's a varying degree of understanding of what the NDIS is and who it will support. Some people have the view that the NDIS will provide direct supports for all Australians with disability. And as you know, it's primarily aimed at providing direct support to about 460,000 Australians with significant disability. So I think we've got to be realistic when we talk about the NDIS, and government has to be very factual. So when we talk about the NDIS, our language should be unadorned, and we should make very clear what the NDIS will do and what the NDIS won't do. Because the NDIS won't do everything and can't do everything, we've got to continue to talk about the National Disability Strategy and the need for all levels of government and also the private sector and the not-for-profit sector to continue to play their part in making sure that we live in a community that is accepting and accessible and where people with disabilities have opportunity. The NDIS can't do it all.
Were you disappointed when you were appointed into the minister's position that it was not a cabinet position? Were you disappointed?
I was delighted to be appointed a minister and to have dedicated responsibility for disability. I think that's the most important thing. And what I also found and continue to find incredibly heartening is that Tony Abbott himself has a tremendous commitment to the NDIS and to Australians with disability. And one of the ways that he's demonstrated that is over the past 2 years, he has led the Polypedal charity fundraiser, which has raised more than $1 million for Carers Australia. And along the 1,000-kilometre route, he has met with carers, people with disabilities, and the organisations that support them. And the next Polypedal will also be raising money for Carers Australia. And again, he will be meeting people with disabilities along that route. So for the Prime Minister, his commitment is more than professional to people with disabilities. It's personal. And as a Minister for Disabilities, I couldn't ask for more.
Okay. So would that also help you ensure that it receives a high level of focus within government?
Absolutely. When you've got the Prime Minister practically demonstrating his commitment and using that opportunity that the Polypedal provides to raise the profile of people with disabilities and of carers, that's an incredibly helpful thing.
Just recently, Morris Newman's recent comments described the NDIS as a worthless but reckless funding initiative. Of course, quite concerned in the disability sector. I mean, I know it because I was quite concerned when I heard the comment. What was your reaction to the comments, and is this a view shared by the government?
Well, look, there are a lot of people who are concerned about the state of the budget, but the point I always make is that good and prudent budget management isn't the enemy of the NDIS, and the NDIS isn't the enemy of good and prudent budget management. As a government, we're for the NDIS and we're for managing the finances of the nation well.
There's some recent speculation about the future of the NDIS, and it's been in the papers quite a bit, and so it should. That it may be the subject of parliamentary review and that Medibank, so private, may be involved in administering the scheme. What message have you got for people with disabilities, their family, their carers about the future of the NDIS?
Well, my message about the future of the NDIS is that it's secure and that we are determined to implement the NDIS in full. Part of the design of the NDIS, in fact, at its very heart, is contestability, and that is that an individual who is assessed gets to take their entitlement to the service provider of their choice. Now, there's absolutely nothing to stop an organisation like Medibank Private or any other body from offering services to people with disability. We want to see more service providers, and already in the launch sites there are new service providers, some that are not-for-profits, some that are businesses who are offering themselves, and there's nothing to stop Medibank Private doing that, but that's entirely a matter for them.
There have been some concerns raised that some states are using the 2019 full NDIS implementation date as an opportunity to freeze new state funding for disability funding for the next 6 years. Are you concerned by this development, and do you believe it will cause a backlog in demand?
Look, I think it's very important for all jurisdictions to honour and deliver on their responsibilities to Australians with disability. Moving from the current state-based system of disability support to an NDIS will take time. The NDIS won't be in place in full nationwide until 2019-20. So no government should step back from their responsibilities in anticipation of the NDIS. Each jurisdiction has got to make sure that they play their part until responsibilities are passed to the NDIS.
Minister, how do you think the lives of carers of people with disabilities will be impacted by the NDIS?
Well, even with an NDIS in place, there's still going to be a very important role for family carers. And the NDIS certainly doesn't seek to displace the contribution that carers make. But if people with disability are getting the supports that they need, then obviously that will make life a little easier for carers, because at the moment we're expecting carers in many circumstances to do far more than is reasonable to expect them to do. So it'll provide assistance to carers, but it's not going to replace carers, and carers often are in that role because they choose to be, because they've got a family member or a friend that they want to help. Sometimes they find themselves in the situation where they're doing more than they're comfortable doing, and the NDIS will make their situation a bit easier.
And the final question, Minister. The NDIS has been described as the biggest social reform of this generation. I agree, I think it's great. We all think that. What do you think are the key opportunities for the NDIS in the future?
For me, one of the measures of success of the NDIS is going to be improving the levels of employment of people with disability. That if you get the supports that you need in your daily life, you're going to be in a much better position to consider employment. And it can come down to some basic things. If you have a mobility impairment, or you might be a paraplegic, and at the moment you may only get some of those personal things that you need, like bathing, a couple of times a week. That can make it difficult to put yourself forward for employment and for job interviews. So in some very fundamental ways, it'll make the consideration of work easier for a lot of people with disability. So for me, although the NDIS only directly relates to supported employment, I think it's going to put people in a much better position to consider open employment as well.
Minister Fifield, thank you very much for your interview today. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks indeed.